A janitor took 3 bullets to save the Prime Minister's pregnant daughter, a woman he'd never met. He was just trying to survive, raising his own daughter alone in poverty. But when the nation discovered his heartbreaking story and the little girl waiting for him, everything changed forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The hospital parking lot was chaos. Reporters pushed against security barriers. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions into the evening air. Inside the hospital, Prime Minister Catherine Morrison paced the hallway, her face pale with worry. Her daughter, Emily, was 6 months pregnant and had come for a routine checkup. It should have been simple. Safe. But nothing was safe anymore. The threats had started 3 weeks ago. Anonymous letters. Dark messages on social media. Someone wanted revenge against the Prime Minister. Someone blamed her for a law she had passed, a decision she had made. And they had promised to make her suffer by hurting what she loved most. Her daughter. Security had been increased. Bodyguards followed Emily everywhere. But somehow it still wasn't enough. The gunman struck at 4:47 p.m. He wore a hospital uniform stolen from a real doctor. He walked past the first security checkpoint with a fake badge. He knew exactly where Emily would be, the 3rd-floor maternity wing. Emily was walking to her car with her bodyguard when the gunman appeared from a stairwell. He raised his weapon. The bodyguard reached for his gun, but he was too slow. 3 shots would have killed Emily and her unborn baby. But they never reached her. James Peterson, a janitor, was mopping the hallway. He was 38 years old, wearing a faded uniform, pushing his cleaning cart. He had been working at this hospital for 2 years. Before anyone could even scream, before the bodyguard could react, James dropped his mop and ran. He threw himself in front of Emily. The first bullet hit his chest. The second hit his shoulder. The third struck his abdomen. James collapsed on the tile floor, his blood spreading in a dark pool. Emily fell backward, caught by her bodyguard. She was screaming, unhurt but terrified. The gunman tried to fire again, but security guards tackled him before he could reload. Within seconds, the hospital erupted into chaos. Doctors and nurses rushed to James. The Prime Minister arrived within minutes, her motorcade screaming through red lights. She found her daughter sobbing but alive, and a janitor dying on the floor in her place. "Who is he?" Catherine demanded, staring at the man who had saved her daughter's life. "James Peterson, ma'am," a nurse said, tears streaming down her face. "He works in maintenance. Single father. He has a daughter." Catherine felt her heart stop. "Get him to surgery. Now. Whatever it takes, save him." But as the medical team worked frantically, one fact became terrifyingly clear. James might not survive the hour. In the surgical waiting room, a little girl sat alone. Her name was Sophie. She was 7 years old, with brown braids and her father's gentle eyes. She wore a school uniform that was too small and shoes with holes in the soles. A social worker had picked her up from her after-school program and brought her here. Sophie didn't understand why. She only knew something bad had happened to her daddy. Prime Minister Morrison found the little girl sitting on a plastic chair, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. When Sophie looked up and saw the most powerful woman in the country standing before her, she didn't recognize her. She only saw another worried adult. "Is my daddy okay?" Sophie asked in a small voice. Catherine knelt down, her expensive suit creasing on the dirty floor. "The doctors are helping him right now, sweetheart. Your daddy is very brave." "He's always brave," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "When I have nightmares, he stays with me. When I'm sick, he misses work to take care of me. When kids at school are mean because my clothes are old, he tells me I'm beautiful anyway." Catherine felt something break inside her chest. This child's father had taken bullets meant for Emily. And now this little girl might lose him just like Emily might have lost her baby. The weight of it crushed Catherine's heart. Emily appeared in the doorway, still shaking from shock. When she saw Sophie, she walked over and sat down beside the little girl. "Hi," Emily said softly. "I'm Emily. Are you sick?" Sophie asked, noticing Emily's pregnant belly. "My daddy works here. He helps sick people." "Your daddy helped me," Emily whispered, tears falling. "He saved my life. And my baby's life." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really? That's what heroes do. My daddy always says we should help people who need help." Emily pulled the little girl into a gentle hug and wept. This child had so little, anyone could see it from her worn clothes and thin frame. Yet her father had given everything to save a stranger. To save Emily's baby, who would grow up with every advantage while Sophie struggled with none. The surgery lasted 9 hours. Dr. Chin finally emerged at 2 a.m., exhausted and covered in sweat. His face told the story before his words did. "James Peterson is alive," he said, and everyone in the waiting room gasped with relief. But barely. The bullets caused massive internal damage. One punctured his lung, another damaged his liver, the third shattered his hip. "We've stabilized him, but the next 72 hours are critical." He paused, his expression grave. "Even if he survives, he'll never be the same. His injuries are too severe. He won't be able to do physical labor anymore. He may need a wheelchair. His life as he knew it is over." Catherine felt the words like physical blows. This man had sacrificed not just his life, but his future, his ability to work, his capacity to care for his daughter. All for Emily. All for a stranger. "What about his daughter?" Catherine asked. "Child Services is evaluating the situation," the social worker said carefully. "Mr. Peterson is a single parent with no family support. If he can't work, if he needs long-term care, Sophie may need to be placed in foster care." "No." The word came from Emily, fierce and sudden. "Absolutely not. My mother and I will make sure they have everything they need." The social worker looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, with all respect, the system doesn't work that way." "Then change the system," Catherine interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of her office. "This man saved my daughter's life. He saved my grandchild's life. I will not let him or his daughter suffer for that heroism. Whatever resources they need, they'll have them." Over the next few days, Catherine learned James Peterson's story. And with each detail, her heart broke a little more. James's wife, Rachel, had died 4 years ago during childbirth. She had been delivering their second child, a son. But complications arose. The doctors tried everything, but Rachel and the baby both died within hours of each other. James had been left alone with 3-year-old Sophie and a grief so deep he could barely breathe. He had been an electrician before, making decent money. But after Rachel's death, he couldn't do that work anymore. The focus required felt impossible. The heights terrified him suddenly. Everything reminded him of what he'd lost. He took a job as a hospital janitor because the hours were stable and the health insurance covered Sophie. The pay was terrible, barely minimum wage. He worked 55 hours a week, taking every shift he could get. James and Sophie lived in a tiny studio apartment in the poorest part of the city. They shared a single bed. They ate rice and beans most days. James wore the same 2 uniforms, washed by hand each night. He walked 3 miles to work each way because he couldn't afford the bus. But he never complained. His coworkers described him as the kindest person they'd ever met. He always smiled. He always helped others. He volunteered to work holidays so coworkers with families could be home. He saved his rare tips to buy Sophie books from thrift stores. "James would give you his last dollar," one nurse told Catherine. "I've seen him do it. Someone needed bus fare, James gave it to them even though it meant he'd walk home in the rain. That's just who he is." Sophie's teacher provided more insight. "Sophie comes to school hungry sometimes. Her clothes don't fit. But she's the sweetest child. She shares her lunch with other kids, even when she barely has any. She learned that from her father. She learned to give even when you have nothing." Catherine listened to these stories and felt ashamed. She lived in the Prime Minister's residence with dozens of rooms. She had a chef, a driver, security. She had never wanted for anything in her life. Meanwhile, James Peterson, a truly good man, had been invisible to people like her. Just another janitor. Just another poor person. Someone easy to ignore. Until he proved impossible to ignore. On the 4th day, James opened his eyes. Catherine was sitting by his bedside when it happened. She had been there for hours, unable to leave. She needed to see him wake up. She needed to thank him. "Sophie," James whispered, his voice weak. "She's safe," Catherine said immediately, taking his hand. "Your daughter is being cared for. She stayed with my daughter Emily. They'd become quite close." James tried to sit up but gasped in pain. Machines beeped frantically. I need to get back to work. Sophie needs me. We have rent due." "James," Catherine said gently, "you need to rest. Don't worry about work. Don't worry about rent. Just focus on healing." "I don't want charity," James said, his voice gaining strength despite his weakness. "I work for what I have. I take care of my daughter myself." Catherine recognized the pride in his voice. She had heard it before from people who had nothing but their dignity. People who would rather suffer than accept what they saw as handouts. "It's not charity," Catherine said carefully. "You saved my daughter's life. You saved my grandchild. That's a debt I can never fully repay. But I can try. I don't want payment for doing the right thing," James said stubbornly. I just want to go home to Sophie. But going home wasn't going to be simple. Over the next week, as James slowly healed, the full extent of his situation became clear. His injuries meant he could never do physical labor again. The janitorial job was gone. He had no other skills, no education beyond high school. He had over $400,000 in medical bills with minimal insurance coverage. He would need months of physical therapy. He might never walk without assistance. And child services was asking hard questions. Could a severely disabled man with no income properly raise a 7-year-old girl? When James heard they might take Sophie, he broke down completely. Catherine was visiting when the social worker delivered the news. She watched this strong, proud man collapse into sobs. Please don't take my daughter, James begged. She's all I have left. Rachel made me promise before she died, promise I'd take care of Sophie no matter what. I can't break that promise. I won't. Just give me time. I'll figure something out. I always do. The social worker sighed. Mr. Peterson, I understand. But we must consider Sophie's welfare. You can't work. You have no savings. No family support. How will you provide for her? I'll find a way, James insisted desperately. I'll do anything. Just don't take my little girl. After the social worker left, James stared at the ceiling in silence. Catherine had never seen such complete defeat in someone's eyes. I failed, James whispered. I failed Rachel. I failed Sophie. I'm useless now. You're not useless, Catherine said fiercely. You're a hero. And heroes deserve better than this. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about James and Sophie. About how one act of violence had destroyed a good man's life. About how unfair the system was, that she lived in luxury while James couldn't even keep his daughter. She thought about James's pride. He didn't want handouts. He wanted to work, to provide, to maintain his dignity. So Catherine developed a plan. But she needed Emily's help. The next morning, mother and daughter sat together in Catherine's office. Emily, I need you to do something, Catherine said. Something important. Emily, still processing her own trauma from the shooting, looked up. Anything, Mom. What is it? I need you to hire James Peterson. Emily blinked in confusion. Mom, he's disabled. He can't work a physical job. What would he even do? He can think. He can speak. He can use a computer, Catherine said. Emily, you run a nonprofit that helps at-risk families. You need someone who truly understands those families, someone who's lived that life. James is that person. He can do outreach, coordinate services, speak to donors. He can share his story to help others. She leaned forward. It's not charity. It's utilizing his most valuable asset. His experience, his compassion, his understanding of what it means to struggle. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. You're right. Our organization needs someone like him. Someone real. Someone who gets it. But he has to truly do the work, Catherine added. No special treatment. If he can't handle the job, we can't keep him just because of what he did. That would be insulting to him. Agreed, Emily said. When they presented the job offer to James, he was skeptical. What's the salary? He asked carefully. $50,000 a year to start, Emily said. Standard for the position. With full health benefits and retirement matching. James's eyes widened. It was more money than he'd ever made in his life. What are the responsibilities? Emily explained. He would coordinate services for families in crisis. Connect them with housing, food assistance, job training, childcare. He would speak at fundraisers, sharing his story to inspire donors. He would work with a team to develop new programs. The hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, Emily added. You can work from home 1 day a week once you're trained. And we understand you need to be there for Sophie, picking her up from school, attending her events. We can be flexible. James sat in silence for a long moment. Why? He finally asked. Why would you do all this for me? Because you gave us our lives, Emily said simply, placing a hand on her pregnant belly. My baby will grow up because of you. I'll get to be a mother because of you. How could we do anything less? And because you deserve it, Catherine added. You've worked hard your whole life. You've been kind when the world was cruel to you. You've raised your daughter with love despite having nothing. You've earned this opportunity. James's hands shook. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Emily urged. Say you'll take the job. Say you'll let us help you build a better life for Sophie. James looked down at his hands, rough, scarred hands that had worked so hard for so long. Hands that had pushed a mop while his body screamed in exhaustion. Hands that had held his dying wife. hands that had raised his daughter alone. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I'll take the job." But Catherine and Emily weren't finished. They learned that James and Sophie were about to be evicted from their studio apartment. The landlord wouldn't wait for James to recover. "I own several properties," Catherine told James. "One is a small townhouse near a good school. 3 bedrooms, a yard, safe neighborhood. You and Sophie could live there." James's face hardened immediately. "I can't afford." "Market rate," Catherine interrupted. $700 a month. I checked the area averages. It was a lie. The townhouse normally rented for $2,500. But James didn't need to know that. He needed to believe he was paying his own way. Slowly, carefully, James nodded. "Okay. But I pay every month. No exceptions. No discounts." "Deal?" Catherine agreed. Over the next few months, something extraordinary happened. James moved into the townhouse with Sophie. She had her own bedroom for the first time in her life. She cried when she saw it. A real bed, a dresser, space to play. "Is this really ours, Daddy?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Yes, sweetheart," James said, his own eyes wet. "This is our home now." James started his new job. Despite his physical limitations, he needed a cane to walk, he tired easily, he proved exceptional at the work. James understood struggling families because he had been one. He knew which questions to ask. He knew how to listen. He knew how to help without making people feel ashamed. James connected with a family yesterday that 3 other workers couldn't reach, Emily told her mother one evening. "They didn't trust us. They thought we were judging them." But James sat with them and told his own story. He showed them his scars, literal and figurative. And they opened up. Now we can actually help them. Catherine visited James at work one day. She found him in a meeting with a young single mother who was crying. James held the woman's hand, speaking softly. "I know it feels impossible," James was saying. "I've been there. Working 3 jobs and still not making rent. Choosing between food and medicine. Feeling like a failure because you can't give your kids what they need. But you're not a failure. You're surviving. And now we're going to help you do more than survive. We're going to help you build a better life." The young mother looked up at James with hope in her eyes. "You really understand." "I really do," James said gently. Catherine watched this interaction and realized something profound. James Peterson had always been valuable. He had always been worthy. Society just hadn't seen it because he was poor. But his poverty didn't diminish his worth. It enhanced his ability to help others who were suffering. 6 months after the shooting, a miracle happened. Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Rachel Sophie, Rachel for James's late wife, Sophie for his daughter. When Emily told James the baby's name, he wept. "You honor them," he said, his voice breaking. "You honor the people I love most. Thank you." Emily held her newborn daughter and looked at James. "Without you she wouldn't exist. She's alive because you were brave. How could I not honor that?" Sophie visited the hospital to meet baby Rachel. The 7-year-old held the infant with careful reverence. "She's so tiny," Sophie whispered. "I'll protect her just like my daddy protected her mama." Emily smiled through her tears. "You and your father have already given her the greatest gift, life itself. But peace never lasts forever." 8 months after the shooting, the gunman went to trial. His name was Derek Winters. His brother had died in a prison riot 2 years earlier, a riot that started because of overcrowding and poor conditions. Derek blamed Prime Minister Morrison. She had cut funding for prison reform. She had made the system worse. In Derek's twisted mind, killing Emily and her baby would make Catherine feel the pain he felt losing his brother. James had to testify. He walked into the courtroom with his cane, his injuries still visible. Derek stared at him with cold hatred. "You ruined everything," Derek hissed as James passed. "You were supposed to just be a janitor. You weren't supposed to matter." James stopped and turned to face his attacker. "I've always mattered," James said quietly. "I just had to take bullets for you to see it. My daughter always knew. My wife knew. And now the whole country knows. I'm not just a janitor. I'm a father. I'm a survivor. I'm a man who chose love over fear. And you can't take that from me." The courtroom was silent. During his testimony, the defense attorney tried to attack James's character. "Isn't it true, Mr. Peterson, that you've benefited greatly from this incident?" the lawyer asked snidely. "You went from poverty to comfort. Some might say you've profited from being shot." James looked the lawyer directly in the eyes. "I didn't ask to be shot. I didn't ask for help. I just tried to save someone's life. If doing the right thing led to good people helping my daughter have a better life, I won't apologize for that. But I'd give it all back if it meant these bullets never happened. I'd go back to that tiny apartment, that exhausting job, that constant struggle, if it meant nobody had to feel this pain. The courtroom erupted in applause. Even the judge didn't call for order. Derek Winters sat with his head down, perhaps finally understanding the depth of what he'd done. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After the verdict, Catherine held a press conference. James stood beside her, Sophie holding his hand. James Peterson represents the best of us, Catherine told the cameras. He had every reason to be bitter about life. He'd lost his wife. He struggled in poverty. He was invisible to people like me, people with power and privilege. But when the moment came to act, he didn't think about his own struggles. He thought about saving a life. He thought about protecting a pregnant woman and her child. She turned to James. This man taught me something I should have known all along. Every person matters. The janitor matters. The single parent working multiple jobs matters. The person society overlooks matters. We are all valuable. We all deserve dignity. We all deserve a chance. Catherine's voice grew stronger. Today I'm announcing new legislation, the James Peterson Act. It will provide support for working families in crisis. Job training, childcare assistance, emergency housing, healthcare access. It won't solve everything, but it's a start. Because no one who works full-time should struggle to feed their children. No one who tries their best should be invisible. The press conference was broadcast nationwide. Within hours, James's story went viral. People were moved by his sacrifice, inspired by his humility, touched by his dedication to Sophie. Donations poured into Emily's nonprofit. Thousands of people sent letters thanking James. Schools invited him to speak. He became a symbol of quiet heroism, the everyday person who does extraordinary things. But James remained unchanged by the attention. He still went to work every day. He still picked Sophie up from school. He still lived simply, still valued the same things: family, kindness, doing right by others. 3 years after the shooting, Sophie turned 10. James threw her a birthday party at their townhouse. Emily came with little Rachel, now an energetic toddler. Catherine attended, taking time from her busy schedule. Other families from the nonprofit came, people James had helped, lives he'd changed. As James watched Sophie blow out her candles, surrounded by friends in a safe home with a full table of food, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later, after the guests left, Sophie climbed into James's lap. She was getting big for that now, but some traditions never die. "Daddy, are we rich?" Sophie asked. James smiled. "We're comfortable, sweetheart. We have what we need." "I think we're rich," Sophie said seriously. "Not because of money. Because of love. We have each other. We have friends. We have people who care about us. That's the best kind of rich." James hugged his daughter tight. "You're absolutely right. That's exactly the kind of rich that matters." As the years passed, James continued his work helping families. Emily's nonprofit grew, expanding to 3 cities. The James Peterson Act helped thousands of struggling families find stability and hope. Sophie grew into a remarkable young woman. She volunteered with her father, helping other kids whose parents were struggling. She never forgot where she came from. She never took her second chance for granted. When Sophie was 16, she gave a speech at her school about heroes. "My hero doesn't wear a cape," Sophie told her classmates. "He wears a button-up shirt and walks with a cane. He's my dad. He took bullets to save someone he didn't know. But that's not why he's my hero. He's my hero because he never gave up. When my mom died, he could have fallen apart. When he got shot, he could have become bitter. When life was unfair, he could have stopped being kind. But he didn't. He kept loving. He kept trying. He kept believing in people." She paused, emotion thick in her voice. "My dad taught me that heroes aren't people who never fall down. Heroes are people who get back up no matter how much it hurts. Heroes are people who help others even when they're struggling themselves. Heroes are people who choose love over anger, hope over despair, kindness over bitterness." "My dad is my hero," Sophie concluded. "Not because he's perfect, but because he's good. And that's better than perfect." The entire school gave Sophie a standing ovation. James, sitting in the audience, cried tears of pride. 10 years after the shooting, Emily's daughter Rachel was 10 years old. She had grown up knowing that James was the reason she was alive. She called him Uncle James and Sophie her sister. One day, Rachel asked James the question everyone eventually asked, Uncle James, do you regret it? Taking those bullets? You still have pain. You still walk with a cane. You gave up so much. James knelt down to Rachel's level. Sweetheart, look at you. You're alive. You're healthy. You're happy. Your mom gets to be your mom. Your grandma gets to be your grandma. All because of one choice I made in 3 seconds. How could I ever regret that? My pain bought your life. That's not a bad trade. But it still hurts, Rachel said, her eyes sad. Yes, it still hurts, James admitted. But some pain is worth it. The pain of loving someone is worth it. The pain of doing the right thing is worth it. The pain that comes from sacrifice is worth it. Because that pain has meaning. It has purpose. It changes things. Rachel hugged him tight. I'll never forget what you did for me. I didn't do it for gratitude, James said. I did it because it was right. But I'm glad you're here, Rachel. I'm glad I got to know you. You're a special kid. 20 years after the shooting, James was 58 years old. His hair was gray, his body worn from old injuries and hard living. But his spirit remained strong. Sophie was a social worker now, following in James's footsteps. She ran a program helping children who had lost parents, kids like she had been. She had a daughter of her own, a 3-year-old named Rachel Marie, after both the women who had shaped her life. Emily still ran the nonprofit, which had helped over 30,000 families. Catherine had served 2 terms as Prime Minister and was now retired, but she stayed active in advocacy work. The 4 of them, James, Sophie, Emily and Catherine, remained close. They were family now, bound not by blood but by sacrifice and love. They gathered monthly for dinner, sharing stories and laughter. At one such dinner, Catherine raised her glass. A toast, she said, to James Peterson, the man who saved my family. The man who taught me what really matters. The man who showed a nation that heroes walk among us every day. To James, everyone echoed. But James shook his head, smiling. No. A toast to all of us. To Emily, who turned her trauma into purpose. To Catherine, who used her power to help others. To Sophie, who never let hardship make her hard. To Rachel, who reminds us why life is precious. To all the families we've helped. We're all in this together. We all matter. That's what I learned from all of this. We're all valuable, we're all worth saving, and we're all capable of saving others. That night, James sat on his porch under the stars. He thought about his life, the losses, the struggles, the pain. But also the unexpected blessings. The second chances. The people who had seen his worth when he couldn't see it himself. He thought about Rachel, his late wife. He hoped she was proud of the man he'd become and the daughter they'd raised. He thought about that moment in the hospital hallway, the split second when he chose to run toward danger. The moment that changed everything. People called him a hero. But James never felt like one. He was just a father who loved his daughter. A man who tried to do the right thing. A person who believed everyone deserved protection regardless of who they were. And maybe that was the definition of a hero. Not someone who seeks glory. Not someone who wants recognition. But someone who sees another human in danger and thinks only, I have to help. James Peterson had been invisible for most of his life. Just another struggling single parent. Just another janitor. Just another poor person society overlooked. But when it mattered most, he had proven that invisible people are still valuable. That poor people are still worthy. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things. His sacrifice had saved 3 lives that day, Emily, Rachel, and little Sophie, who might have lost her father forever. But his sacrifice had done more than that. It had changed laws. It had helped thousands of families. It had inspired a nation to look at struggling people with more compassion. 1 man. 3 bullets. Countless lives changed. James closed his eyes and smiled. He had lived a good life. Not an easy one. Not a comfortable one for many years. But a meaningful one. A life that mattered. And really, what more could anyone ask for? The stars shone above him. Somewhere he felt Rachel was watching. Proud. Grateful. At peace. I kept our promise, Rachel, James whispered to the night. I took care of Sophie. I gave her a good life. And along the way I helped some other people too. I hope that makes you proud. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, warm and comforting. James smiled. He was home.